My name's Veronica Monet, and I want to tell you that I'm feeling a little bit sad right now. One of the reasons that I feel sad is that here we are again getting ready to possibly pass legislation that affects the lives of sex workers, and yet where are the sex workers? Somehow they didn't get invited to speak. So I did contact Stanford, and I said it would be nice if a sex worker got to speak at this event, and so here I am, and I thank Helen very much for that. I am not currently a sex worker. I worked as a prostitute from 1989 to 2004. That's a very long career. During that time, I was a sex worker rights activist. I've been retired now for 8 years. I'm still a sex worker rights activist. I'll probably be an activist for sex worker rights until the day I die. What I do today is actually teach anger management skills to couples. So although I used to sleep with married men for a living, I now help married people fix their marriages. What I also am is a rape survivor, an incest survivor, a domestic violence survivor, and I have a tremendous feeling in the pit of my gut for anybody who is victimized. I absolutely know that rescuing victims doesn't help us. We need to be empowered, and that means that you have to talk to us like we're people, with respect and dignity. Not come to us and tell us what we need. Don't come to us and tell us what we want. Ask us what we need and what we want. Chris Kelly spent $2 million on this. I can think of so many women who could have used that money to get out of prostitution. So many people who could have used that to help victims. But apparently somebody's political career is more important than really helping the victim. Human trafficking has become conflated with the term prostitution. It's actually on the agenda for a lot of organizations now. One in particular that I found on the internet was the International Association of Sex Trafficking Survivors. They come out and say that making distinctions between sex trafficking and prostitution is harmful and misleading. So what we have in Proposition 35 is some very overbroad terminology. The basic premise of wanting to close those loopholes that allow a pimp who is taking advantage of underage children to not hit the streets, I'm in agreement with that. I can't imagine that anybody here wants to see sex trafficking survive. I can't imagine that anyone here wants to be lenient on people who practice sex trafficking. I certainly don't. When I worked as a prostitute, I was an independent. I was 29 when I started. I was 44 when I retired. I was very much in charge of my life. I was married. So here's how Proposition 35 would affect me if I were still working. Because I was making a six-figure income and my husband was beneficiary of that six-figure income, even though he had an $80,000 a year job, he would be considered my pimp. And now we don't have the word pimp anymore. We've replaced it with trafficker. What happens when you go from prostitution and pimp and start talking about trafficking? One of the things that you do is invoke a lot of federal legislation. So now you've turned it into a huge crime. In the past, if my husband had been convicted of being my pimp because he lived under the same roof with me, he might have gone to prison for 2 whole years. I think that would have been horrific. Now we're talking about 12 to 20 years and mandatory registration as a sex offender. We're absolutely talking about destroying lives. When I was a sex worker, I had a sex worker girlfriend who didn't have a home. She'd fallen on hard times, and she wanted a place to stay. And I let her stay in my house because I actually owned a home. Today, if I were to give her a place to stay in my house, I would be a trafficker. Proposition 35 criminalizes the lives of sex workers to such a degree that the friends that I still have that are working, I will be afraid to let them make phone calls from my house. I will be afraid to give them a ride in my car. I would be afraid to accept money from them for gas. And I sure as hell wouldn't want to give them any money. This will separate us. It will divide us. It will cause the people that you want to rescue to be further underground. Prohibition has never been a solution to solving crime. Certainly not helping prostitutes. And I've been in this movement to try to seek rights for sex workers for over 2 decades. And I can't tell you how it grieves me to think that we have come to a place where somebody can watch a television show and feel that they have a mission from God. And somebody else has got $2 million. I don't have that kind of money, neither do any of my colleagues. We don't get a voice about our own lives. But somebody else can put this on the books, and because it's under the banner of human trafficking, this calls to all of our hearts. The Democratic Party, of which I'm a member, the Republican Party, candidates that Barbara Boxer, I vote for these people, and they're all voting against me. So, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.